Welcome to the Writer Reads, The Songster and the Pirates. This is part 2 of 4. Taran glared at the wolf and shook her neck free of his colleague's grasp. She kept her eyes on the wolf's face as she lowered herself to her knees. He knelt with her, resting his hands on the edge of the bag. Behind her, his companion knelt also, the warmth of his hand in the centre of her back a warning that he was present, even though it offered no restraint. Taran closed her eyes as she curled up in the centre of the suitcase, unnerved to be so vulnerable amongst predators, and not comforted by the hand that shifted from her back to her shoulder. She opened her eyes again, just in time to see the first wolf lift the top of the bag and fold it over her, and that was when she remembered just how well she coped with confined spaces, particularly spaces she hadn't chosen to enter herself. Something in the way her body tensed must have alerted them, because the lid lifted again and the grip on her shoulder tightened. There's no way you're going to stay quiet in that bag, is there? Taran flicked her gaze from one to the other and wished she hadn't been quite so cooperative. She also wished her fear would subside. These were wolves. Fear was exciting and had a distinctive scent. If she couldn't get a grip on herself, she'd go from being designated prey to actual prey. She watched their gazes sharpen with interest and tried to shift out from under the hand pinning her in place. Yeah, I didn't think so. At the sight of the auto-injector, Taran tried to claw her way out of the bag and under the nearest car. It wasn't that she was afraid of needles. It was more that she didn't want to be unconscious and completely at their mercy. Too bad, the wolf said, and set the auto-injector against her skin. Taran froze, staring at him in horror. Your sigh? You thought our timing was luck? And Taran remembered the growl disrupting her concentration, the wolf on the roof, the wolf running from the club with his hands over his ears. This wolf running from the... Oh. She was screaming as the darkness reached out and pulled her under, fighting to get out of the bag without moving a muscle, completely unconscious when the wolves closed the lid and zipped it tight. Awareness returned with a multitude of grasping hands and the heated rush of pins and needles as Taran was pulled from the suitcase. It also came with a rolling stomach, stuffy head, and an overwhelming surge of fear. She was already moving when she came clear of the bag, even if her eyes weren't obeying her commands to open, and her muscles wouldn't respond. In her head, she was running. She didn't remember the sigh until he pounced on her thoughts and pinned them in a squirming mass to the floor of her mind. Stay still, he ordered. The wayfarer wishes to speak with you. Taran had questions. So many questions. Wayfarer? What in all of Hades could he want with me? Me? I want you to sing a military transport into an asteroid belt. And then I want you to keep its escort from firing. The reply came in tones rolled in wealth and smoothed by power, and it came from right in front of her. Taran tried to open her eyes, but they still wouldn't obey. Propped up between two lean, well-muscled bodies, Taran felt someone unshackle her feet, while someone else undid the cuffs at her wrists. She felt the metal ease away from her flesh and heard the clink as the cuffs and shackles were stowed. Wondered when they'd take the tape off. I don't think we need to do that. Do you? As if one sigh wasn't enough. I'm not Sigh, the wayfarer said. I can only raid a mind. I can't communicate with it. And Taran wondered what it would take to keep either one of them out. More training than you've got time for. So, will you sing for me? Sing, huh? There was no way in 100 years of no that she wanted to sing for him. But Taran figured he'd worked that out already, and he'd have the first threat ready to roll. I'd rather not have to motivate you, the wayfarer said, so I'll ask you one more time. Will you sing for me? Help him wreck a military transport and murder countless people? Taran swallowed, kept her eyes closed and shook her head. Her no was muffled by the tape across her lips, But the wayfarer wasn't happy regardless. I believe there are 3 wolves who'd like a piece of you right now. Are you saying you'd rather have their company than sing for me? A wave of cold swept over Taran's body and her face went numb. She swayed on her feet and 2 sets of hands grabbed hold of her arms to steady her. Taran's muffled squawk of fear made the wayfarer laugh. No, so you will sing. Taran curled in on herself, pulling her arms in close to her chest, but her escorts wouldn't let her go. I don't want to. But she didn't want to go with the wolves either. She tried to open her eyes, managed a flicker that showed her a blur of grey foregrounded in stark white light. A monochrome world populated by shadows. The blue-grey shadow in front of her stepped back, turned, and walked away. Walk her out of it, he said, and waited while Taran's escort took her for a circuit of the large room they were in. Was it a hold, or somewhere else? Keep moving, which meant the sigh must be one of the wolves with a grip on her arm. Fantastic. Taran wondered if walking would make it harder for him to wander through her mind. Was it something that needed focus, or something? It's more like breathing, or trying to walk and talk at the same time. It depends on what I'm doing. That wasn't what Taran had wanted to know, but she was glad she did. The feeling slowly returned to her feet and legs, and the sluggishness disappeared. The weight of her eyelids lightened, and she opened her eyes, taking in the space around them. It was more like a training room, with a firm track skirting its edges for running, and the center covered with mats for sparring. I figured you might need the space to run in. The wolves like a chase. Taran's heart sped up, and she snapped her gaze toward the wayfarer's voice. She stopped, pulling at the hands that held her. Sweet Hades, the man really should have been an elf, she thought, taking in the narrow Arctic features of his form. He took a step toward her, and she took in the incredible pallor of his skin and the royal blue of his combat fatigues. An elf, you say? He said, and sounded more amused than he had any right to be. Taran continued to stare as he moved from the shadowed edge of the walkway and onto the mats in front of her. His skin really was the color of glacial ice. She continued to stare. Apart from the hard lines marring his features, the guy was incredibly stare-worthy. Right up until she looked into his eyes. Oh yeah, that was a mistake. If she thought the rest of him was cold, his eyes made him seem warm. They were a blue dark enough to match the fatigues, but there was nothing in them. No heart, no feeling, not even the slightest skerrick of a dam. Uncertainty trembled in her chest. What's it carrying? The convoy? What else? That's none of your concern. How many lives? Does it matter? It always matters. And yet you've taken lives before. I've left that kind of work behind. You can never leave that kind of work behind you. Someone always remembers. And when they don't, the work itself calls. That much was very true. Taran remembered nights when singing for an audience hadn't been enough. Nights when she'd longed for more purpose than just making folk happy. On those nights she'd had to be very careful not to let the battle songs rise and stir dreams of combat in people's heads. Mercenary recruiters reported a surge in applications on every morning after. You see? And Taran did, but she didn't want to admit it. You'd be happier working for me and the Night Hunter clan. Taran recoiled. The Zanzibars had fought the shadows all too often. Those wolves weren't of Terran origins, and their civilizations were as old as Terra's ancients. It had taken mankind many long years to prove he was not prey, and the hunters remained among those yet to be convinced. You misjudge us. We hold humankind in strong regard. They are warriors all. Our employers, on the other hand. He let the words trail to nothing before switching back to the matter before them. You will sing for us, or should we find your mother? Her mother? Oh, Hades, no! Taran felt the world waver and closed her eyes. No one wanted to find her mother. There was a reason her mamma had hidden on the remotest world she could find. Taran was about to shake her head when it occurred to her that she'd be doing the galaxy a favor if she did tell the wayfarer where her mother was. Ah, perhaps not then. In a way, that was a relief, but it left them with no option but to try and make her comply. This was not a good place to be. The werewolf at her side slid his arm around her waist and pulled her close. He stroked a long-nailed claw down her cheek, his warm breath following the curve of her neck from shoulder to hairline. I could chase your thoughts all day, murmured through her mind, and the quick wet dab of his tongue touched her skin, followed by the slightest scrape of teeth. Taran gasped, and the impression that the wolf could chase her all day followed before her head went quiet. She was pulling air in short, fast puffs by then, trying not to join her mind in hiding in one of the furthest corners of her skull.